when one P-40 faced 20 Japanese fighters alone. And this happened. April 18, 1942. Skies over Port Moresby, New Guinea. 7:42 a.m. The tropical sun cuts through the low clouds like blades of golden light. The air is dense, heavy with humidity and kerosene. Below, the jungle stretches like an infinite green carpet, punctuated only by the brown scars of improvised landing strips. The distant sound of radial engines echoes between the mountainous valleys. At the command post of the Japanese forward base at Leh, Lieutenant Commander Shigeru Itaya observes the horizon through Dutch-captured Zeiss binoculars. His face is relaxed, almost bored. He lowers the binoculars and lights a peace cigarette, slowly exhaling smoke. "Just another lost American," he mutters to his intelligence officer, allowing himself a thin smile. "He probably doesn't even know where he is." Beside him, Warrant Officer Hiroshi Tanaka consults the morning report. 20 Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters have just taken off from Leh. 20 of the best pilots in the Imperial Navy. Veterans of China, of Pearl Harbor, of Singapore. Men who had accumulated dozens of kills each. Against them, a single dot on the radar. A single contact. Identified as an American Curtiss P-40 Warhawk. Alone. Separated from its formation. Vulnerable. Itaya lets out a short laugh, almost a bark. 20 against 1. That's not even combat. It's an execution. He doesn't know yet. None of them know. That in the next 18 minutes, all their certainties about air superiority, about training, about overwhelming numbers, all of it will be thrown against the mountains of New Guinea like burning wreckage. The name of the American pilot is Second Lieutenant Boyd Wagner, and he is not lost. He is hunting.
Part 1. The Birth of a Predator. To understand what happened on that April morning, we need to go back in time, back to where it all began, not with Boyd Wagner, but with the machine he flew. Buffalo, New York. Curtiss Wright Corporation Facilities, autumn 1937. The development hangar smells of fresh-cut metal and engine oil. Dust floats in the beams of light entering through the tall windows. In the center of the space, partially covered by a stained tarp, is the XP-40 prototype. Donovan Berlin, the chief engineer of the project, stands next to the aircraft with his arms crossed. His face is tense. His hands tremble slightly, not from nerves, but from exhaustion. He hasn't slept properly for 3 weeks. The XP-40 is an evolution of the P-36 Hawk, a fighter that was beginning to show its limitations. Berlin knew they needed more power, more speed, more altitude. The war in Europe was intensifying, and the news arriving from Spain, where the Civil War had become a laboratory for new aerial tactics, was alarming. The German Messerschmitt Bf-109 fighters were dominating the skies. Speed over 560 kilometers per hour. Impressive climb rate. Devastating armament. Berlin knew that the P-36, with its 500 kilometers per hour and Pratt & Whitney R1830 radial engine, would not be a match. The solution was right there, covered by the tarp. The Allison V1710 engine, a liquid-cooled V12 capable of generating 1,040 horsepower. It wasn't the most powerful engine in the world, it wasn't the most reliable, but it was what they had. "It's the best we can achieve with what we have," Berlin tells Colonel Oliver Eccles, the Army Air Corps representative who came to inspect the progress. "The Allison V1710 gives us the necessary power to compete, but it has limitations." Eccles walks around the aircraft. He touches the fuselage. The metal is cold. What kind of limitations? Berlin pulls a sheaf of documents from his lab coat pocket. Test reports, graphs, numbers that tell a complicated story. The single-stage supercharger limits performance at high altitude. Above 4,500 meters, power drops dramatically. The Germans and the British are developing engines with two-stage superchargers. That means their fighters will maintain power at altitudes where the P-40 will be suffocating. Eccles frowns. So we are building an inferior fighter from the start? We are building a fighter suitable for specific missions, Berlin corrects, choosing his words carefully. At low and medium altitude, the P-40 will be competitive, very competitive. The fuselage is robust. We can arm it heavily, 6.5 caliber machine guns. The structure can take punishment. And the dive. Berlin pauses, a slight smile appearing on his tired face. The dive is where it shines. The P-40 can dive at speeds that would cause other fighters to disintegrate. But Eccles is not smiling. What if our pilots encounter enemies at altitude, if they are forced into turning fights? Berlin doesn't answer immediately. He knows the answer. Everyone there knows. In pure turning fights, especially at high altitude, the P-40 will be at a disadvantage against specialized fighters. Then our pilots will have to be smarter, Berlin finally replies. They will have to use the machine's strengths and avoid its weaknesses. They will have to fight the right way.
Wright Field, Test Field, Ohio, March 1939. The first production flight of the P-40 takes place on a cold spring morning. Test pilot Lloyd Child completes a series of basic maneuvers: takeoff, climb, level flight, coordinated turns, controlled dives. When he lands, his assessment is cautiously positive. It's heavy on the controls compared to European fighters, he writes in his report. The roll rate is not exceptional. In sustained turns, it bleeds energy quickly, but the structure is solid as an anvil. I took it to 675 kilometers per hour in a vertical dive, and it didn't shake at all. The controls became heavy but responsive, and when you squeeze the trigger with 650 cals, Child pauses in his writing, searching for the right words. It's like commanding a storm. But problems begin to surface in subsequent tests. The evaluation pilots from the Army Air Corps, accustomed to lighter, more agile fighters, complain about the maneuverability. It flies like a truck, one of them writes. You don't dance with a P-40, you beat it through the sky. The altitude tests are particularly discouraging. At 5,000 meters, the P-40 shows mediocre performance. At 6,000 meters, it is frankly poor. Meanwhile, reports from Europe speak of combat happening at 7,000, 8,000 meters. We are building the wrong fighter, a senior official declares in a tense meeting at the Pentagon. The Germans are going to eat our pilots alive. But production has already started. Contracts have been signed. Factories are retooling. And most importantly, there is no ready alternative. The P-38 Lightning is still in development. The P-47 Thunderbolt is just lines on drawing boards. The P-51 Mustang does not even exist yet. We send what we have, General Henry Arnold declares, ending the debate. And we pray that our pilots are good enough to compensate for the machine's deficiencies.
Selfridge Field, Michigan, summer 1940. This is where Boyd Wagner sees a P-40 for the first time. He is 23 years old, a West Point graduate, a qualified pilot with less than 200 hours of fighter flight time. Tall, thin, with intense blue eyes that seem to be constantly calculating distances and angles. Wagner walks slowly around the aircraft parked on the tarmac. The P-40 is painted in olive drab and neutral gray, the standard camouflage scheme. The shark mouth has not been added yet. That will come later with the Flying Tigers. But even without the iconic paint, the aircraft has an aggressive presence. The long nose of the Allison engine, the low, predatory line of the fuselage, the thick, robust wings, each carrying 3 Browning M2 machine guns.
"What do you think?" the instructor asks. Captain James Selman, a veteran with flight time in the first P-36s. Wagner does not answer immediately. He touches the wing. He feels the warm metal under the summer sun. "It's heavy," he finally says. "It looks heavy." "It is," Selman confirms. 3,800 kilograms fully loaded, 500 kilos more than a Messerschmitt, almost 1,000 kilos more than a Japanese Zero. "Then it won't be able to turn with them." "No, it won't." Wagner looks at the instructor. "So how do we fight?" Selman smiles. It's the question he was waiting for. "I'll show you." In the following months, Wagner immerses himself in the physics of air combat. Not the romanticized version of World War I aces with their chivalrous turning and counter-turning duels, but the brutal and mathematical reality of modern combat. Speed is life. Altitude is a bank of speed. Never enter a fair fight. The P-40 is bad at turning fights? Then don't turn. Use the speed in the dive. Use the robust structure. Use the 6 machine guns like a descending hammer. Boom and zoom, Selman explains during a briefing. He draws on the blackboard with chalk. You maintain altitude. You identify the target below. You roll and dive. Maximum speed. You fire. A single 2-second burst as you pass. You don't stick around to fight. You continue the dive, convert speed back into altitude, away from the combat, and reposition. "What if they climb to get us?" another pilot asks. "They can't," Wagner answers before Selman can. Everyone looks at him. Wagner stands up and points to the numbers on the board. The P-40 dives at more than 600 kilometers per hour. Nothing in the sky can catch us in a dive. And when we convert that speed into a climb, even with the engine limited at altitude, our inertia takes us back up before they can react. Selman is smiling. Exactly. But theory is one thing. Practice is an entirely different matter.
Clark Field, Philippines, December 8, 1941. One day after Pearl Harbor, war reaches the Philippines. Boyd Wagner is now a second lieutenant, transferred to the 17th Pursuit Squadron based at Clark Field. He has exactly 17 hours of simulated combat in the P-40, 0 hours of actual combat. At 12:35 p.m., 54 Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers and 36 Zero fighters appear over Clark Field. The base is unprepared. Most of the P-40s are on the ground. Those that manage to take off are quickly outnumbered. Wagner is on patrol when the attack begins. He sees the Japanese formation, a cloud of aircraft so numerous it seems to darken the sky. His breathing quickens. His hands grip the stick. Every instinct screams at him to turn and run. But he does not run. He climbs. Wagner shoves the throttle fully forward, feeling the Allison V-1710 roar in response. The P-40 climbs aggressively, burning precious altitude he had accumulated. But he needs more, always more. 3,000 meters. 4,000, 4,500. The Zeros are below now, circling the bombers. They haven't seen him yet. Not yet. Wagner rolls the P-40 inverted. For a moment, he is upside down, looking through the canopy at the enemy formation below. The world is inverted. The sky is the ground is the sky. Then he pulls. The P-40 spins around its axis and dives vertically. The speed increases exponentially. 500 kilometers per hour, 550, 600. The wind howls around the canopy. The structure groans but holds. Wagner keeps his eyes on the leader of the Zero formation, an A6M with squadron commander markings. 700 meters, 500. 300. Wagner centers the sights. The reflective gun sight puts the green reticle directly on the Zero's center of mass. 200 meters. He squeezes the trigger. 6 Browning M2 machine guns fire simultaneously. The combined rate of fire is 4,800 rounds per minute, 80 rounds per second. The P-40's fuselage vibrates with the recoil. Brass casings rain down inside the cockpit. The Zero explodes. It literally explodes. The wings separate from the fuselage. The unarmored fuel tank detonates in an orange and black fireball. Fragments fly everywhere. Wagner flies through the cloud of wreckage at 650 kilometers per hour, and he keeps diving. He does not look back. He does not celebrate. He does not hesitate. Exactly as trained, he converts the speed of the dive into a steep climb, separating himself from the enemy formation before they can react. When he levels out again, he is at 5,000 meters, alone. The Zeros are 1,500 meters below, circling confusedly, searching for the attacker who appeared and disappeared like a ghost. The radio explodes in panicked Japanese communications. He does not understand the words, but he recognizes the tone. Confusion, anger, fear. He checked his fuel gauge. Still have time. Repositions for another pass.
In the following 16 days, Boyd Wagner becomes a legend. As the Philippines collapse around him, American and Filipino forces being pushed toward Bataan, Clark Field abandoned, the situation becoming increasingly desperate. Wagner keeps flying. December 8th, 2 confirmed kills. December 10th, 3 kills. December 12th, 2 kills and 1 probable. December 16th, 4 kills in a single mission. December 19th, 3 kills. The Japanese begin to avoid engaging individual P-40s. Orders are issued: do not chase Warhawks in a dive, maintain altitude, force them into turning fights where the Zero is superior. But Wagner never accepts these engagements. He fights like a coward, a captured Japanese pilot would later say during interrogation. But then he corrects himself, searching for the right word in English. No, not a coward. He fights like... The pilot makes a gesture with his hand, mimicking a bird of prey diving. Like an eagle, always above, always choosing. We are fish. He is an eagle.
Part 2. The Trap.
December 24th, 1941. Evacuation of Clark Field. The last functional aircraft are being flown to improvised fields in Bataan. The rest are being destroyed so they do not fall into Japanese hands. Black smoke rises from burning hangars. Secondary explosions echo as ammunition detonates. Wagner is sitting on the wing of his P-40, not the same one he flew on the first day, but the third or fourth. He has already lost count. When Captain Selman approaches him, "We lost," Selman says bluntly. He looks like he has aged 10 years in 2 weeks. The Philippines are going to fall. It's a matter of weeks. You are being evacuated. Wagner looks at him. To where? To Australia. Darwin initially, then further south to safer bases. They are forming new units. You will train new pilots. Pass on what you've learned. I should stay, Wagner says. This is where I'm making a difference. You made your difference, Selman replies. 21 confirmed kills in 16 days. You are the highest-scoring American pilot of the war so far. But if you die here or are captured, all that knowledge dies with you. The pilots arriving in the theater, they don't know how to fight the P-40. They don't know how to survive against the Zero. You do, and you need to teach them. Wagner does not answer. He looks at the horizon where smoke columns mark Manila burning. It's an order, Wagner, Selman finally says. You leave tomorrow. Darwin, Australia, January 15, 1942. The evacuation of the Philippines is a chaotic nightmare. Pilots, ground crews, equipment, and the few surviving P-40s are transported on crowded ships and overloaded transport aircraft. Some do not make it. Japanese submarines patrol the sea lanes. Zeros chase any aircraft they identify. But Wagner arrives in Darwin with his life and his combat notes.
Darwin, in January 1942, is a city on the edge. Everyone knows the Japanese are coming. The question is not if, but when. Anti-aircraft defenses are being built. Air raid ditches are being dug. Strategic stocks are being moved inland. Wagner is placed in the 8th Pursuit Group, flying training missions with new pilots while also conducting defensive patrols. It's frustrating work. The new pilots don't understand. They want to turn. They want to dogfight. They want to be chivalrous aces. "You will die," Wagner says brutally during a briefing. 20 young faces look at him with expressions ranging from offense to shock. "You will die in the first sustained turn you attempt against a Zero. That aircraft was designed for one thing: turning combat. It is lighter than the P-40 by nearly 1,000 kilograms. It can turn inside of us. It can climb better than us at altitude. If you try to fight its way, you are playing on its field, and you will lose." "So how do we fight?" one of the pilots asks. He looks 17. He's probably 19. Wagner walks to the blackboard and begins to draw. "You fight the P-40 way. Altitude, speed, dive, fire, escape. You never stay. You never commit. You hit and run. If it didn't die on the first pass, you reposition and try again, or you leave and look for another target. There is no heroism. There is no glory. There is only math and physics, and survival." But it is not just frustration. Slowly, Wagner begins to see progress. Some pilots, not all, but some, understand. They begin to think three-dimensionally. They begin to value position over elegant maneuvers. They begin to survive. One of them is Lieutenant George Keyser, a calm Texan with a natural aptitude for gunnery. Another is Lieutenant John Lane, a former crop duster pilot who instinctively understands energy and speed management. "You are building a doctrine," Keyser tells Wagner one evening while reviewing gun camera footage, "a totally new way of thinking about air combat." Wagner shakes his head. "It's not new, it's just adaptation. The Japanese have superior turning fighters, so we don't turn. We have stronger structure and a better dive, so we dive. It's simple." Simple in theory, much harder when there are 20 Zeros trying to kill you. Wagner smiles. It is a cold smile. Yes, much harder. He does not know yet that in less than 3 months, he will need to prove those words in the most extreme way possible.
Part 3. The Southwest Pacific Theater. Port Moresby, New Guinea, March 10, 1942. The war in the Pacific is going badly for the Allies. Very badly. Hong Kong fell. Malaya fell. Singapore, the British impregnable fortress, fell in less than a week. A devastating humiliation. The Dutch East Indies are collapsing. Burma is being invaded. The Philippines are in their final throes. Japan has conquered an empire in 3 months. An empire larger than Alexander the Great's, larger than Rome at its height, and they show no signs of stopping. The only thing preventing a direct invasion of Australia is New Guinea. Port Moresby on the southern coast of New Guinea is the critical point. If the Japanese take Moresby, they will have a base just a few hundred kilometers from northern Australia. Bombers will be able to strike Darwin, Cairns, Townsville. Invasion troops can be launched. The defense of Moresby, therefore, is not just important, it is existential. Boyd Wagner arrives in Port Moresby on March 10th with the 17th Provisional Squadron, 12 P-40s, most worn out from combat, and 16 pilots, half of whom have less than 50 hours in type. The base is primitive, a dirt airstrip surrounded by jungle, tents for accommodations, irregular supplies, no adequate early warning radar, just native coast watchers with radios who, if lucky, give 10 minutes warning before the Japanese appear.
"This place is indefensible," the base commander, Colonel Raymond Elsmore, tells Wagner frankly during the initial briefing. "We are outnumbered 10-1, sometimes 20-1. The Japanese have bases at Leh and Selamawa," he points to a stained map, "just 130 kilometers to the north. They can attack us with an hour's notice. We, on the other hand, have to fly 100 kilometers just to be in position to intercept." "What is the mission?" Wagner asks. "Survive. Make it expensive for them. Make them think twice before every attack, and pray that reinforcements arrive before we are overwhelmed." Wagner looks at the map. He traces routes mentally, calculates distances, altitudes, flight times. He finally says, "We can do better than survive. We can win." Elsmore looks at him as if he has lost his sanity. "Wagner, do you understand the odds? 12 aircraft against the entire 4th Kokutai? Against some of the best pilots in the Imperial Navy?" "I understand perfectly," Wagner replies calmly, "and I also understand that the P-40, flown correctly, can kill Zeros. I killed 21 of them. I can teach my pilots to do the same." March 17, 1942. First mission over Leh. The mission is simple in the briefing, dangerous in the execution. A surprise attack against the Japanese base at Leh. 6 P-40s, low altitude, quick bursts at ground planes, at ground installations, in and out before the Japanese can react. Wagner leads. Flying beside him are Kaiser, Lane, and 3 newer pilots, Lieutenants Carl Brown, Andrew Reynolds, and Thomas White. They take off at 5:15 a.m., still dark. The idea is to arrive at Leh at dawn, when visibility is poor and the Japanese are less alert. The flight north is tense. They fly low, just 30 meters above the jungle to avoid detection. The sun begins to rise behind them, painting the clouds orange and pink. At 6:22 a.m., Leh appears ahead.
Wagner visually checks his formation. All in position. He gives the signal, 2 wing rocking movements, and pushes the nose down. The P-40s dive to deck altitude, accelerating aggressively. The Japanese base is waking up. Wagner can see figures walking among the structures, smoke rising from kitchens. And there, lined up perfectly along the runway like targets in a shooting gallery, 23 aircraft. Zeros, Bettys, Nells. "All flights, attack free," Wagner transmits. His voice is calm, almost casual. "Focus on the aircraft. Ignore ground targets. We have 60 seconds." He selects a 0 near the start of the line. Centers, fires. The 6 machine guns rip the 0. The engine detonates. The wings fold. The fuel catches fire. Wagner does not stop. He transitions to the next target and the next. 3 Zeros destroyed in 15 seconds. Around him, the rest of the formation is doing the same. Kieser destroys a Betty. Lane hits a Nell that explodes magnificently. Brown and Reynolds are working on the line of parked Zeros. Then, the Japanese wake up. Anti-aircraft machine guns open fire. Red and green tracers arc through the morning sky. A burst passes so close to Wagner's canopy that he can see the individual bullets. "Break, break, break," he transmits. "Flight Able, west. Flight Baker, east. Regroup over the ocean." The P-40s separate in all directions, each seeking maximum speed. Wagner pulls up to climb, converting the attack speed into altitude. He looks back once. Leh is covered in black smoke. He counts at least 10 large fires. "All flights, damage check," he transmits when he is 10 kilometers away. The responses come one by one. All survived. Reynolds took some holes in the tail. White is leaking a bit of oil, but all are flying. "Good job," Wagner says. "Let's go home." But the Japanese do not forget. 3 days later, a massive raid hits Port Moresby. 40 Betty bombers escorted by 54 Zeros. The 12 P-40s climb to intercept. It is a chaotic, savage battle. The sky fills with tracers, engine smoke, falling aircraft. Wagner shoots down 2 Zeros in the first 5 minutes, but the Japanese have numbers. They always have numbers. Brown is hit. His P-40 begins to burn. Wagner sees him bail out.
No, wait. P-40s don't have ejection seats. Brown is jumping manually, and a white parachute blooms. Reynolds is not so lucky. A Zero catches him with a perfect deflection shot. The P-40 disintegrates in the air. No parachute. White manages to return to base, but his P-40 is so damaged it is written off. 9 of the original 12 P-40s are now functional. "We can't sustain this," Elsmore says that night. He and Wagner are drinking bad Australian whiskey in a humid tent. "Every mission we fly, we lose aircraft we can't replace, pilots we can't replace. They can absorb the losses, we can't." Wagner swirls the whiskey in his glass. He is looking at the amber liquid as if it holds answers. "Then we change tactics. We stop intercepting in force. We start using individual patrols. 2 planes, at most. Hit and run. We never commit to full combat." "Individual patrols?" Elsmore repeats. "Against formations of 50 aircraft? That's suicide." "It's survival," Wagner corrects. 1 aircraft is hard to detect. 1 aircraft at altitude is nearly impossible to intercept before it strikes, and if we use the right tactics— He pauses, thinking. The Japanese are confident now, arrogant. They fly predictable formations. They don't expect attacks. We can use that. Elsmore slowly shakes his head. "You were describing freelance hunting. Lone wolf. I'm describing what works." April 5th, 1942. Solo patrol. Wagner takes off alone at 6 a.m. Just him and his P-40 against the endless blue sky of New Guinea. He climbs to 5,500 meters, well above normal operational altitude, where the Allison engine is struggling against the thin air, but still delivering enough power. Here he can see everything. The coastline snakes below like a black ink line against the blue-green ocean. The jungle stretches in all directions endlessly. And to the north, flying in clean, confident formation, 18 Betty bombers with an escort of 12 Zeros. Wagner watches. Does not react, just watches. The Zeros are flying in 2 formations of 6, flanking the bombers. Altitude, 4,200 meters. Speed, approximately 300 kilometers per hour. They are conserving fuel for the return flight. Perfect position. Wagner rolls inverted and dives. The physics of the attack is brutal and elegant. He falls from the sky like a stone, gravity adding kinetic energy every second. 500 kilometers per hour, 580, 630. The Zeros don't see him until it's too late. Wagner selects the rear leader of the portside group, adjusts for deflection. The Zero is flying straight and level, completely unaware. 400 meters, 300 meters, 250. He fires. The convergence of the 6 machine guns, set for 250 meters, exactly where Wagner likes it, places the entire cone of fire into a space the size of a dinner table. The Zero flies directly into it.
The aircraft simply breaks apart. The tail separates first, then the wings fold upwards like a closing book. The pilot has no time to react, no time to eject. Wagner flies through the wreckage cloud at 650 kilometers per hour and continues the dive. The other Zeros break formation, turning desperately to find the attacker. But Wagner is already 3,000 meters below them, pulling out of the dive and converting speed into distance.
Part 4. April 18th, 1942. The trap closes. The day begins like any other. Wagner wakes at 4:30 a.m., eats a simple meal, powdered eggs, hard bread, coffee strong enough to dissolve metal. He checks the mission board, solo patrol, take off at 6:15 a.m., north route along the coast, look for targets of opportunity. Routine. At exactly 6:15 a.m., he taxis his P-40 onto the runway. The aircraft is a survivor. Metal patches cover bullet holes on both wings. The nose is stained with oil, but the Allison engine purrs smoothly as he performs his pre-flight checks. "You're my lucky charm," he murmurs to the aircraft, touching the panel. "Just one more time." Takeoff is clean. He spirals upward over Port Moresby, gaining altitude in wide circles. 3,000 meters, 4,000, 5,000, 5,500. The sun is rising now, turning the ocean into liquid gold. It's almost beautiful enough to make you forget there's a war going on. Almost. At 7:12 a.m., he sees the formation. North, 20 degrees above the horizon. Estimated altitude, 4,000 meters. Wagner takes binoculars from his side pocket and focuses. It takes a few seconds for his eyes to adjust, then he sees. Zeros. Many zeros. He counts systematically. 4 formations of 4, 16. No, wait, there are more behind. 5 formations, 20 aircraft in total. Jesus, he mutters. It's the largest fighter patrol he has ever seen without bombers. They are not escorting anything. They are hunting. Hunting him. For a long moment, Wagner just watches. His mind is processing options, tactics, probabilities. He can turn, he can go back to base. No one would blame him. 20 against 1 are impossible odds. But then he thinks of the new pilots in Port Moresby, thinks of Brown burning to death, of Reynolds disintegrating, of all the 19-year-old boys who will fly against Zeros in the coming months and years. They need to know it's possible, that the Japanese are not invincible, that the P-40, flown correctly, can win. Even against 20. Wagner checks his fuel, 3/4 of a tank, enough for 20 minutes of combat, plus reserve for return. Checks ammunition, all 6 guns loaded, 281 rounds per gun, 1,686 rounds total. Checks controls, ailerons responsive, elevator responsive, rudder responsive. Checks himself, pulse elevated but controlled, breathing rapid but regular, hands steady. All right, he says to himself, let's go to work. He pushes the nose down and begins a gentle descent, positioning himself behind and above the Japanese formation. The Zeros have not detected him yet. They are flying in a wide search formation, scanning the sky below and around them. But no one is looking up.
Wagner positions himself carefully. He is now at 5,800 meters, 600 meters above them, 2 kilometers behind. Perfect position. The rear formation of Zeros, 4 aircraft in Finger 4, is slightly separated from the main group, probably rookies, or pilots being punished. Targets. Wagner adjusts the throttle, dips the nose down slightly, begins to close the distance. 1,800 meters, 1,500, 1,200. Still undetected. The sun is behind him, making him virtually invisible. 800 meters. One of the Zeros begins to weave. The pilot is making clearing turns, checking his 6 o'clock. 600 meters. The pilot sees something. Wagner sees the aircraft waver, begin to turn. Too late. Wagner pushes the throttle to emergency. The Allison screams. The P-40 accelerates as if kicked. 400 meters. 300 meters. He selects the rear leader. Not the pilot who turned, that one is alerted, will be difficult, but the leader, still flying straight. 200 meters. Wagner places the reticle directly on the Zero's cockpit. No fancy deflection shot, no wing shot. Center of mass, where the pilot is. He fires. 2 seconds of continuous fire. 400 rounds converging into a deadly cone. The Zero explodes, the canopy shatters. Black smoke streams from the engine. The aircraft rolls inverted and falls. Wagner does not stop to watch. He is already transitioning to the second target. The Zero that began to turn is now in a full turn, desperately trying to bring its guns to bear. But it is turning horizontally, bleeding speed. Fatal error. Wagner does not turn with it. Instead, he pulls vertical, converts horizontal speed into altitude, rolls at the top, and drops onto the Zero like a hammer. The Japanese pilot sees it too late. He tries to brake, but there is no time. Wagner fires from the top of the vertical dive. The gravity helps keep him steady. The 6 machine guns rip the Zero from engine to tail. 2 shot down, 18 to go. And now everyone else knows he's here.
The sky explodes into action, zeros turning in all directions, commands shouted in Japanese over the radio, formations breaking as each pilot tries to locate the attacker. Wagner continues the dive, accelerating through the formation before they can react coordinately. He passes so close to a zero that he can see the pilot's wide eyes. Below now, speed 620 kilometers per hour. He pulls out of the dive, the structure groaning under the G's. The world darkens at the edges of his vision. He tenses every muscle, forcing blood back to his brain. Vision returns. He is level at 3,000 meters, flying south at maximum speed. Looks back. Zeros everywhere, diving after him like enraged bees. But they are behind, and in a dive, nothing catches a P-40. Wagner maintains the dive to 2,000 meters, then pulls again and converts the speed into a climb. The P-40 climbs like a rocket, the inertia of the dive carrying it upward. 3,000 meters, 4,000, 4,500 meters. The Zeros chasing him are now below him, trying to climb to intercept. But they burned energy in horizontal speed. They have no vertical momentum. Wagner levels out, checks around, counts zeros. 18 still in the air. 16, he corrects himself, seeing 2 smoke plumes where the first victims fell. The Japanese are regrouping now, formations reforming. They have learned. They won't be caught off guard again. All right, Wagner mutters, let's see how much you've learned. He watches the new formation take shape. 4 groups of 4 now flying at staggered altitudes. 1 group at the base altitude of 4,000 meters, 1 group above them at 4,500, 2 groups at 3,500, forming a lower screen. It's a clever defensive formation, full altitude coverage, no blind spots. But there are always weak points. Wagner notices that the top group, 4,500 meters, is slightly isolated, only 200 meters above the next closest group, but in air combat, 200 meters can be an abyss. He needs more altitude, needs to be above them again. He climbs. The Allison is struggling now. 5,700 meters is above its ideal envelope, but still delivering power. 6,000 meters. The Zeros have detected his climb. 2 aircraft from the top group break formation and begin to climb to intercept him. Exactly what Wagner wanted. He maintains the climb to 6,300 meters, then rolls and dives, not for the 2 climbing Zeros, but for the space they left in the top formation. The 2 Zeros are now above him, but without speed, hanging in their climb arcs, harmless for 5, maybe 10 seconds. Wagner dives through the gap in the formation, selecting the rightmost Zero of the 2 remaining in the top group. Deflection shot, 30 degrees. Difficult, but not impossible. He leads the target, anticipating the movement. Fires. Half the shots miss, but half connect. The Zero begins to leak hydraulic fluid. The pilot tries to turn, but the controls don't respond properly. The aircraft begins to spin out of control. 3 shot down. But now Wagner is in the middle of a cloud of Zeros. The 2 he passed above have recovered and are diving. The lower groups are climbing. He is surrounded. Time to leave. Wagner rolls inverted, always inverted, because pulling negative G would be slower, and pulls into an almost vertical dive. Red tracers pass around him. A burst hits his left wing, perforating the metal but hitting nothing critical. Another burst passes so close to the canopy that he feels the pressure impact. He dives through 3,000 meters, 2,500 meters, 2,000 meters. A Zero is stuck on his tail now, diving with him, firing constant bursts. This pilot is good. Very good. He is anticipating Wagner's movements, placing shots where Wagner will be. He waits until 1,800 meters, then does something unexpected.
He cuts the throttle completely. The P-40 decelerates dramatically. The Zero, at maximum dive speed, cannot decelerate fast enough. For a split second, the Zero is in front of the P-40. Wagner accelerates again and fires. A short burst, 2 seconds. The Zero explodes. 4 shot down. Wagner is not fighting 20 Zeros simultaneously. That would be impossible.
He is fighting small groups, isolating them, destroying them, and escaping before reinforcements arrive. He uses the clouds, dives through a cumulus formation, disappears from sight for 15 seconds, emerges behind a distracted Zero, fires, 5 shot down. He uses the sun, positions himself with the sun directly behind him, making himself virtually invisible until the last second. 2 Zeros flying in close formation, not expecting attack. Wagner dives through both, firing at both in sequence. The first falls immediately. The second manages a wounded turn for 2 kilometers before the engine fails. 6 and 7 shot down. He uses the geography, lures 3 Zeros into a narrow valley between 2 mountains. They follow him, confident they have him cornered. But at the last second, Wagner pulls vertically, using all his speed to climb over the mountain peak. The Zeros try to follow, but they are too low, too slow. 2 strike the mountain face. The third manages to pull up in time, but his bleeding speed stalled. Wagner rolls and drops onto it. 8, 9, and 10 shot down. The final tally, the diving demon's legacy. But the P-40 is suffering. The oil temperature gauge is climbing. The left wing has at least 20 bullet holes. One of the ailerons is slow to respond, and the fuel is dropping dangerously. He checks. Less than a quarter tank. Maybe 15 minutes of flight. Less if he keeps using combat power. He needs to end this. He scans the sky. 9 Zeros remaining. No, 9. One of them is leaking smoke, clearly damaged, returning to base. 9 Zeros, still regrouping after the chaos of the last few minutes. Wagner makes quick mental calculations. Fuel, ammunition, aircraft wear, fatigue. He has been flying for almost 20 minutes at maximum combat intensity, every muscle tense, every sense amplified. He should leave, return to base. 10 kills against 20 opponents is an incredible feat. No one would expect him to continue. But Wagner looks at the remaining 9 Zeros and sees something that stops him. They are afraid. The formation is loose, aircraft too far apart, pilots clearly reluctant to fly close to each other. They are making constant clearing turns, checking every angle. No one wants to be next. They broke, Wagner realizes. Not militarily, they are still in the sky, still fighting, but psychologically, the fighting spirit is fractured.
And if he can break these 9 pilots completely, if he can make them run, the story will spread. It will spread through the entire 4th Kokutai, through the entire Japanese naval aviation. One more time, he decides. One last time. He climbs again. It's slower now. The engine is overheating, losing power, but he manages to reach 5,500 meters. The Zeros detect him immediately, but instead of attacking, they close in defensive formation, all flying in a circle, covering each other. Smart, but not smart enough. Wagner watches the circular pattern for 30 seconds. There is a rhythm to it. Each Zero passes through a point where it is momentarily isolated from its comrades' fire support. Only for 2 seconds, but 2 seconds is enough. He waits for the perfect timing. A Zero passes through the blind spot. Wagner dives. It's his steepest dive yet, almost completely vertical. The speed increases so fast that the wind around the canopy hits a high, terrifying pitch. 600 kilometers per hour, 650, 680. The P-40 is shaking. It shouldn't be shaking, but something is loose, something is damaged. Wagner ignores it, maintains the dive. The target Zero realizes too late. The pilot tries to turn, but there is neither time nor space. Wagner fires from the vertical dive. This time he holds the trigger down, 3 full seconds, 500 rounds.
The Zero does not explode. It disintegrates. Pieces of the fuselage fly everywhere. A wing separates completely. The engine falls like a stone. 11 shot down. But Wagner used too much ammunition in that burst. He checks the counter. Only 400 rounds remaining. Maybe enough for 2 targets, 3 if he's very lucky, and 8 zeros still in the sky. He pulls out of the dive, the structure groaning in protest, converts speed to altitude, but this time the P-40 doesn't want to climb so high. It stops at 4,800 meters, engine overheating, aircraft vibrating. Wagner looks back. The 8 remaining Zeros are turning. Not to attack, to flee. They're leaving. For a moment, Wagner doesn't believe it. He blinks, sure he is seeing wrong, but he is not. The Zeros are in full retreat, flying north at maximum speed, abandoning any pretense of tactics. A single P-40 has just made 8 Zero fighters, veteran pilots of the Imperial Japanese Navy, run from the battlefield. Wagner should pursue, probably could catch 1 or 2 before they escape. But he looks at his instruments. Oil temperature, in the red line. Fuel, critical. Ammunition, low. And he is 45 kilometers from Port Moresby. Time to go home, he says out loud. He turns south and begins a gentle descent, conserving every drop of fuel.
Part 5. The Echo Through History. Wagner lands at Port Moresby at 8:28 a.m. 43 minutes after takeoff, 26 minutes of actual combat, 11 confirmed kills, 8 enemies driven from the battlefield. The P-40 coughs and dies the moment he shuts down the engine. Steam is rising from the cowling, oil is dripping from multiple joints. The left wing is so riddled with holes it looks like Swiss cheese. The ground crews rush to the aircraft. They stop when they see the damage. "Jesus Christ," Chief Mechanic Sergeant Michael Donovan mutters. "How did you fly that back?" Wagner unlatches the canopy. It takes 3 tries. It's jammed. And climbs out. His legs are trembling. Adrenaline is finally starting to leave his system. "She's tough," he replies simply. Elsmore runs over from the control tower, holding paper. Coastal Observer reports. Japanese radio intercepts. "The Japanese are reporting 10 to 12 shot down," he says, almost breathless. "They think they were attacked by multiple P-40s. They don't believe it was one aircraft." Wagner doesn't respond. He is looking at his P-40, mentally cataloging every damage, every failure that almost killed him. "Do you understand what you did?" Elsmore continues. This is going to—" He stops, searching for words. "This changes everything." Leh Air Base, 2 hours later. Lieutenant Commander Shigeru Itaya, the same man who laughed at the idea of a lone P-40 that morning, stands in the control tower watching 8 damaged Zeros land, out of 20 who took off. 12 did not return. He summons the surviving pilots for immediate debriefing. They walk into the briefing room slowly, eyes vacant, hands still trembling. "Report," Itaya commands, his voice harsh. The surviving flight leader, Lieutenant Takeo Shibata, takes a long time to answer. When he finally speaks, his voice is hoarse. "It was a ghost, appeared from nowhere, killed, disappeared. We tried to chase, but it was like chasing wind. We tried to form a defense, but he found the weak spots. It didn't matter what we did. He was always above, always faster, always—" "It was one aircraft," Itaya interrupts. "One. You were 20. "It didn't matter," another pilot says. Warrant Officer Kenji Yamada, a veteran of China with 14 kills. His hands are trembling so violently he puts them under the table. Numbers didn't matter. He didn't fight like a pilot. He fought like a force of nature, like trying to fight a storm. Itaya looks around the room. He sees the same look on every face. Shock, trauma, fear. Who was he? Itaya finally asks. Who is this pilot? We don't know the name, but the ground observers in Moresby call him the diving demon, the demon that falls from the skies. Itaya picks up a report from his desk. Accumulated intelligence on Allied pilots. He flips through until he finds what he is looking for. A grainy photo. 2nd Lieutenant Boyd Wagner, 8th Pursuit Group, 21 kills in the Philippines. It's him, Itaya says in a low voice. It has to be. He looks at the broken pilots in front of him. Men who flew against the Chinese and defeated them, against the Dutch and crushed them, against the British and sent them running. All broken by a single American pilot in an aircraft everyone said was inferior. How do we stop him? Itaya asks, more to himself than the pilots. No one answers, because no one knows.
Part 6. The Waves Spread. The story of the April 18 combat spreads like wildfire, first through Port Moresby, then across all of Australia, then across the Pacific, and finally throughout the United States. The New York Times, April 25, 1942. Lone pilot routs 20 Japanese fighters. 2nd Lieutenant Boyd Wagner, flying a Curtiss P-40 Warhawk fighter, engaged and defeated a formation of 20 Japanese Zero fighters over New Guinea. 11 confirmed kills. 8 enemy aircraft forced to break and retreat. Lieutenant Wagner returned to base with his aircraft damaged but functional. This unprecedented feat demonstrates that, against all expectations, American pilots can not only compete, but dominate against the Japanese naval aviation previously considered invincible. The story is exactly what America needs. After months of defeats, Pearl Harbor, the Philippines, Wake Island, finally, a clear, heroic victory. Wagner is promoted to first lieutenant, then captain, then major. He receives the Medal of Honor, the Distinguished Service Cross, the Silver Star with clusters. More importantly, he receives something that changes the war: credibility. Pilot Training Field, California, June 1942. 400 cadet pilots are sitting in a stuffy hangar, listening to Wagner lecture on P-40 combat tactics. He does not look like a hero. He is thin, almost gaunt after months in the Pacific. He speaks in a monotone, unemotional voice. But every word carries the weight of real experience. The P-40 is inferior to the Zero in 2/3 of all combat regimes, he says frankly. The audience shifts uncomfortably. This is not what they wanted to hear. They turn better. They climb better at altitude. They accelerate better in level flight. Wagner pauses, letting the information settle. Then, why did I kill 32 of them and I'm still alive? Total silence now, all eyes fixed on him. Because I never fought their fight. Never. Not a single time. He walks to a blackboard and begins to draw diagrams, vectors, three-dimensional combat geometry. The P-40 is superior in exactly 3 characteristics: robust structure, dive speed, concentrated firepower. If you base your entire combat tactic on these 3 strengths and rigorously avoid any situation that exposes its weaknesses, you will survive. You will win. He points to a specific diagram, a P-40 above a Zero, vertical descending arrow. Altitude is a bank of energy. You climb before combat, always, no matter how long it takes, no matter if you lose targets, you climb, because every meter of altitude is potential speed. It is potential life. A cadet raises his hand. Sir, what if the enemy is also at altitude? Then you climb higher, he answers without hesitation. And if they climb with you, you break combat and return to base. You never ever accept combat on equal terms,
because equal terms mean the superior aircraft wins, and the 0 is the superior aircraft in traditional combat. Another cadet. But sir, isn't that cowardice? Wagner turns slowly to face him. His eyes are hard.
Cowardice is letting your wingman die because you wanted to be a hero. Cowardice is wasting your life and your aircraft in a fight you cannot win. Stupid bravery doesn't win wars. Tactical intelligence wins wars. He returns to the blackboard. You were trained to think of air combat as duels, knights of the air. One-on-one made the best pilot win. Forget all that. Modern air combat is murder, pure and simple. You hunt, you ambush, you kill before the enemy knows you are there. And if they know you are there, you failed. He draws a series of diving attacks, each showing the P-40 appearing from above, attacking and escaping. Boom and zoom. It is the only tactic that works consistently. You dive, you fire, you escape. You don't stay, you don't turn, you don't try to finish a damaged enemy if it means losing altitude and speed. You maintain discipline, always. For 3 hours, Wagner breaks down every romantic concept of air combat and rebuilds it from scratch with cold mathematics and brutal physics. When he finishes, half the cadets are discouraged. They came expecting stories of glory. They received lessons in survival. But the other half understood. And these will become the survivors. Army Air Forces Headquarters, Washington, D.C., August 1942. General Henry Hap Arnold sits behind a heavy oak desk reading report after report of combat from the Pacific. In front of him is Colonel Clarence Irvine, Chief of Tactical Development. The numbers don't lie, Irvine says, pointing to graphs. Pilots trained in Wagner's methods have a 70% higher survival rate, 70%, General, and a 40% higher kill rate. Arnold studies the numbers. This is using P-40s, the same aircraft everyone said was junk 6 months ago. Well, it's not junk, Irvine corrects. It never was. It was just misunderstood. We were trying to make it fight like a Spitfire or a Measurement. Wagner showed how to make it fight like itself. Arnold leans back in his chair. So the issue is not the aircraft, it is the doctrine. Exactly. And this has implications for our entire fighter program. The P-47 that is going into production, heavy, won't turn well, but it dives like a meteor and has devastating firepower. If we apply Wagner tactics, the P-47 will be a formidable weapon. What about the P-51? The Mustang is interesting, Irvine says. It's more balanced. It can turn reasonably well. But where it truly shines is speed and range. With Wagner tactics adapted for its specific strengths. He pauses, smiling slightly. I think the P-51 can change the war. Arnold drums his fingers on the desk. I want Wagner back here. I want him writing the fighter tactics manual, and I want every pilot in the Army Air Forces trained in his methods before seeing combat. Sir, Wagner is requesting to return to combat. He says he's not a teacher, he's a pilot. He is what I say he is, and now he is a teacher. The war doesn't need one more good pilot. The war needs 1,000 good pilots, and Wagner will create those 1,000 pilots. But there is a cost. Boyd Wagner is not made for an instructor role. He is not made for public relations parades, interviews with journalists, medal ceremonies. He is a predator, and predators do not thrive in cages. In his letters to friends still in the Pacific, frustration bleeds through every word. They want me as propaganda, as a symbol. But symbols don't win wars. Aircraft win wars. Pilots win wars. I should be there. Port Moresby, September 1942. Without Wagner, the 17th Squadron continues using his tactics. George Kaiser now commands the unit. He has 27 kills, John Lane has 22. Other pilots trained by Wagner are spread across the Pacific, each evangelizing the doctrine. Boom and zoom, never turn, altitude is life. The Japanese begin to adapt. They stop flying predictable formations. They start keeping zeros on high CAP specifically to counter diving attackers. They develop new tactics. But the seed is planted. Every month, more American pilots arrive in the theater, and more of them know how to fight intelligently instead of bravely. The Japanese kill rates begin to drop, slowly at first, then more rapidly. Pearl Harbor, November 1942. Wagner finally gets what he wants, a return to combat. But not in the Pacific. He is sent to Alaska, where a Japanese threat in the Aleutian Islands requires attention. It is less glamorous work, horrible weather, fewer enemies, but it is combat. On November 29, Wagner shoots down 2 Zeros over Kiska, his last kills, 34 in total. January 1943, north of Agegik, Alaska. Boyd Wagner is piloting a P-40 on a reconnaissance patrol. The weather is bad. Snow, low visibility, high winds, marginal flying conditions. At 2:22 p.m., his radio transmits a final message. Entering clouds. Will return in... The transmission cuts out. The P-40 never emerges from the clouds. Extensive searches find nothing. No wreckage, no body. Just disappearance. Boyd Buzz Wagner, 26 years old, the highest-scoring American ace in the early years of the war, the man who proved that the P-40 could win, simply vanishes into the gray sky of Alaska.
Part 7. The Legacy. Airfield, somewhere in England, June 1944. Captain Don Gentile, flying a P-51 Mustang with the 4th Fighter Group, is briefing his unit before a deep escort mission over Germany. "Maintain altitude over the bombers," he instructs. "When bandits appear, do not dive immediately. Let them commit, then drop on them. Boom and zoom, exactly as Wagner taught." One of the newer pilots raises his hand. "Sir, who is Wagner?" Gentile pauses, looks around the room. Most of the pilots here are under 22 years old. The war has been going on for years for them. Wagner is ancient history. "Boyd Wagner," Gentile says slowly, "was the man who figured out how to win when everything said we should lose. He took an aircraft everyone called inferior and used it to destroy the enemy's best pilots. He wrote the manual we all use, literally. The fighter tactics manual you studied, half of it is Wagner." "Is he still flying?" the new pilot asks. "No," Gentile answers. "He died in 43, Alaska. Flying accident in bad weather." Silence in the room. "But his tactics are flying," Gentile continues. "Every mission we fly, every bandit we shoot down, Wagner is with us. Remember that when you're up there. Don't be dumb heroes. Be smart predators, exactly like he was." Tokyo, Japan, September 1945. The war is over. Japan has surrendered. Allied occupation forces are cataloged in Japanese naval aviation reports. When an American intelligence officer, Major Robert Henderson, is flipping through Japanese naval aviation reports when he finds something interesting. It is a tactical directive dated April 25, 1942, issued by the Imperial Navy Command to all fighter units. Henderson reads, his expression changing from curiosity to awe. The directive details specific tactics to be used against lone P-40s flying at altitude. Do not chase in a dive. Maintain multiple altitude layers. Never fly predictable formations. Always maintain high cap. At the end of the document, there is a handwritten note from a senior officer. The American pilot Wagner fundamentally changed combat tactics. He transformed an inferior aircraft into a superior weapon through discipline and intelligence. All pilots must study his methods. He is the most dangerous enemy we faced. Henderson makes a copy of the document. He knows this needs to be in the official archives. A single American pilot had forced the Imperial Japanese Navy to rewrite its entire combat doctrine.
Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland, April 18, 1952. 10 years exactly after the combat over Port Moresby. A ceremony is taking place. A new fighter is being dedicated, the F-86 Sabre, which dominated the skies of Korea. General Hoyt Vandenberg, Chief of Staff of the Air Force, is giving a speech. The F-86 won in Korea, not just because of technological superiority, he says, but because our pilots fought intelligently. They used altitude, they used speed, they used tactical discipline. They fought the Wagner way, and they won. In the audience is an older man, not that old, only 52, but the war aged him. Colonel George Keyser, retired now, hearing the general quote his dead friend. After the ceremony, a journalist finds him. "Colonel Keyser, you flew with Wagner, correct?" "I did," Keyser confirms. "What was he like, as a person, I mean?" Keyser thinks for a long moment. "Cold," he finally says. "Not cruel, but cold, calculating. He saw air combat as mathematics, solving an equation. Input, positions, speeds, altitudes. Output, victory or death. That doesn't sound very human." It wasn't, Keyser admits, but it was effective. And in war, effective is what matters. He pauses. But there was something else, something the reports don't capture. What? He cared, Keyser says, about every pilot he trained, every tactic he taught. Not because he wanted glory, but because he wanted us to survive. Every time he said, "Don't turn," it wasn't about winning, it was about not dying. The journalist is taking notes. Do you think he knew the impact he would have? No, Keyser answers. He was just trying to survive and teach others to do the same. But in the process, he looks at the sky where F-86 jets are making demonstration flights. He changed how air wars are fought forever.
Epilogue. Skies over New Guinea, present day. The blue sky over Port Moresby seems untouched by time. The jungle still stretches to the horizon. The mountains still guard their secrets. Somewhere in those mountains, rusted wreckage of Zeros and Bettys still rests where they fell 80 years ago. The jungle slowly reclaims them, covering them with vines and moss, transforming instruments of war into relics. Occasional tourists visit now. There is a small museum in Moresby, some photos, some information panels, a replica P-40 with a shark-mouth paint job. Most visitors do not know the details. They don't know about April 18th, about one man against 20, about the combat that changed doctrine. But pilots know. In Air Force academies around the world, the United States, England, Australia, even modern Germany and modern Japan, instructors still teach the Wagner principles. They don't always use the name. Sometimes it's just energy fighting tactics, or vertical combat, or hit and run. But the essence is the same. Never fight the enemy's fight. Use your strengths. Avoid your weaknesses. Be disciplined. Be smart. Survive. Nellis Air Force Base, Nevada. Air Force Weapons Training Center. Elite fighter pilots are being trained here, the best of the best. F-22 Raptors, F-35 Lightning IIs, aircraft Wagner could not have imagined. But the principles are the same. Altitude is life is still true,
even when altitude means 50,000 feet and supersonic speed. Never fight fair is still true, even when fair means within the enemy's missile envelope. Survival through intelligence is still true, even when intelligence means computers, radar, weapon systems beyond comprehension. An instructor is teaching the history of fighter tactics. He shows old footage, P-51s over Germany, F-86s over Korea, F-4s over Vietnam, F-15s over Iraq. See the pattern, he says. No matter the era, no matter the aircraft, the pilots who win are the ones who control the engagement, who dictate terms, who fight intelligently. He clicks to the next slide, a grainy black and white photo, a young thin man, intense gaze, standing next to a P-40. This is Lieutenant Boyd Wagner, the instructor says. In April 1942, he proved something fundamental about air combat. It's not about having the best aircraft. It's about using your aircraft in the best way. The student pilots look at the photo. One of them asks, "Sir, how many kills did he have?" 34 confirmed, probably more, but it's not about the number. Then what is it about? The instructor smiles. It's about this. Every enemy he faced thought they had the advantage. Zeros were superior to the P-40 on paper, but Wagner changed the paper. He rewrote the rules, and when you can rewrite the rules, he pauses, letting the words sink in. You can win any fight.
Coda, the sound of silence. There is a sound that defines that day in April 1942. It is not the roar of Allison engines. It is not the firing of machine guns. It is not the explosions of dying Zeros. It is the silence that came after. The silence when Boyd Wagner landed his battered P-40, when mechanics saw the damage and wondered how he survived, when pilots realized that they had witnessed something impossible. The silence at Japanese bases when only 8 out of 20 aircraft returned, when veteran pilots, men who had conquered half of Asia, sat in silence, unable to explain what happened. The silence in briefing rooms across the Pacific when the story spread, when pilots realized that maybe, just maybe, they were not destined to lose this war. That silence echoed through decades. It echoed through every pilot who learned to think three-dimensionally, through every aircraft that was used correctly instead of traditionally, through every life saved by intelligent tactics instead of wasted bravery. And it still echoes today. When pilots look at the sky and see not just blue space, but a three-dimensional geometry of possibility, when they understand that victory does not come from brute force, but from the intelligent application of available force, when they realize that the aircraft does not determine the pilot determines the aircraft. April 18th, 7:42 in the morning. A lone P-40 against 20 Zeros. Odds that said, impossible. Physics that said, impossible. Convention that said, impossible. But Boyd Wagner did not believe in impossible. He believed in mathematics, in physics, in discipline, in using what you have in the best way you can. And for 26 minutes, over the skies of New Guinea, he turned impossible into inevitable. The sky did not belong to the Zeros that day. It belonged to the predator who hunted from above. It belonged to the pilot who refused to fight their way. It belonged to the man who proved that intelligence defeats strength. It belonged to Boyd Wagner. And the echo of that day, the roar of 6 Browning M2s, the whistle of the vertical dive, the silence after an impossible victory, still resonates through every sky where fighters fly. Because he did not just win a battle, he changed how battles are won. Forever.